Hey guys, Val here. A few nights ago, another creator that was pretty close to the Wells brought up Dave Paulides and the missing 411 and said that he had been covering the summer wells and they were directing everybody over to the canamproject. So I went over and I looked around and I took a listen and I looked at what was going on. And no disrespect to anyone or to the Can-Am Project, but there was some misinformation floating around over there, starting with that Rosemary Bly was Don Wells' sister. Don Wells has been exonerated by a lie detector test. Don Wells had been exonerated by having an alibi and that he was at work, on top of multiple other things. Listen, you guys, this is still an ongoing, open investigation. Bigfoot is not responsible for taking this child. Aliens is not responsible for taking this child. And she certainly has not been raptured. So let's continue looking for this child from a criminal aspect of an open investigation. And thanks for giving this video a watch. Like, subscribe. I just wanted to show you guys what was going on. Thanks.
This may not make sense to you at the beginning, but it will in the end. A woman named Rosemary Bly, B-L-Y, 21 years old, missing August 21st, 2009, about 8 p.m. She lived in a rural area of St. Croix Falls in Wisconsin. She was married, had 2 kids, 2 and under. And she was going to drive 4.5 miles to go see her cousin at a bar. And it was one of the rare nights that her husband was going to babysit. She was going to go out and see her cousin. Well, they met. Everything was good. And she left the bar and she failed to return home. She was driving a 2001 white Pontiac Grand Prix. So that's the FBI missing poster on her.
There was also DNA found in her car.
Wholesome girl. Nice girl. Young lady, really. Well, 5 days later, her car is found in Grantsburg. And I'll show you this. This is important, too. The car is located just up here in Grantsburg. Her meeting was here in Cushing, and she lived on the outskirts of St. Croix Falls. So, this is the river that separates Wisconsin from Minnesota. This is Minneapolis. This is a cluster zone of missing people. Now, I am not saying in the least that this case falls into this cluster, but follow me for a few minutes here. So, they find the car, they process the car for evidence. They call the husband in because they've been having problems in the past. He passes a polygraph, has no idea where his wife is, played no part in the disappearance. She had very little money, no credit cards. And the week before she disappeared, she fell off a horse and hurt her head real bad. And her mom said, you need to go to the doctor. She didn't think that her daughter ever went. She doesn't think Rosemary did go to the doctor. But I think it's a weird coincidence that in a lot of these cases, these people would have head pain. The Polk County Sheriff's Office in Wisconsin has the case. They went to the FBI missing person wanted poster that I just showed you. But you see, the FBI doesn't investigate missing people. So they do think it's criminal. This case is 12 years old. The kids are being here 14 years old now. Rosemary Bly. Now, why am I talking to you about this? Because there's a girl missing, 5 years old, from an area of Tennessee. And it's a current case that's ongoing. Now, I don't know if this one is a missing 411 case, but it's looking pretty close. Summer Wells, 5 years old, missing June 15th of this year, 6:30 p.m. Summer was out with her grandmother. Heard something. Out with her grandmother and her mom planting wildflowers during the day. Near the end of the day, she goes inside, sees her brothers inside the house watching TV, and tells them she's going to go to the basement and play with her toys. They see her go to the basement. After that, she disappears. There's a door at the basement where she could have walked out. This is in a super rural area off of a road called benhillroad in the northern part of Tennessee. Very northern part of Tennessee. Closest town is probably Dykes Mill, D-Y-K-E-S. Let me show you this. So, the residence is over here. The road dead ends here. There's a creek called Limestone Branch that runs this distance up a very rural, heavily forested area here. They live at the end of the road. Now, being a policeman for a number of years, crimes don't happen on dead-end roads very often. You know why? Because there's only one way in and one way out. And people that live on dead-end roads, they keep track of who comes into their road and who doesn't. So for a suspect to come in there and steal and abduct Summer, to me, doesn't make any sense at all. But what happened to her? Well, that's $1 million question. As of a couple days ago, they had 2,500 acres that were searched. They had over 30 different agencies involved in the search. They had canines. They had helicopters. They had planes. They had ATVs. They had people on horseback. The dad said that there's no way she left that property on her own. She wouldn't have left the confines of their area. The other question is, why wouldn't she respond to her own name by searchers? And it was as they got into this investigation that Summer's dad said, well, you guys may want to know that my own sister disappeared August 21st, 2009.
Wrong information.
Rosemary
Misinformation, sir. Wrong information.
That's odd. The case I just told you about in Wisconsin. That was Summer Wells' dad's sister.
No, it
What
wasn't.
happened?
Mom's
That's
sister.
pretty unusual, I'd say. Now, the dad was at work when Summer Wells disappeared. He was at work in Jonesboro, a long ways away. And he had a good alibi. He wasn't involved. On
We
the
don't know
spectrum
that.
of crime, mothers and grandmothers don't commit a lot of crime against kids. Dads sometimes do, but he's been exonerated by a
No,
polygraph
he hasn't.
and an alibi that he wasn't in the area. So this area in Tennessee, kind of weird. Why is it kind of weird? It's weird because I've written about it before. So you can't make this stuff up. March 26th, 1962. March 26th, 1962. At about 10 o'clock at night, there was a girl, 2 years old, disappeared 5 miles away from Summer Wells. I doubt anybody has ever heard of this. Guarantee the searchers have never heard of it. But in the Crawford home, one of the kids got sick. And they got in a car and they drove to a physician. They ended up getting back home about 10 o'clock at night. And Wanda Fay was sitting in the front seat, laying on the front seat, sleeping. So they left her there. They walked about 100 yards to their house from the main road. They said that when they got back, they thought that they saw a car near their car. But when they got to their car, Wanda was gone. They called the sheriff. The sheriff responded, and they actually had deputies right in that area because there was a crime that occurred, a shooting in the area, and they were looking for a suspect. So they bring in deputies. They start searching. They search all night. And the deputies noticed something really weird. That the door handles on the inside of the car that Wanda was in were all broken or off. And it was impossible for you to open the car doors from the inside. You had to reach over and open it from the outside. And the deputies believed it was impossible for Wanda to open that car from the inside, based on her age, which was 2 years old. So, 13 hours later after she disappears, and 3 miles away from where she disappeared, across several creeks, deep creeks, Wanda wanders into a residence to get assistance. Remember, she's just 2 years old. So, she's brought back to her house, and she's interviewed, and she initially said 3 words: "Man took me." That's it, man took me. Well, the deputies happened to know these guys that were driving around that night, and they arrested both of them for a variety of crimes. Later, all the charges were dropped, because when Wanda was further questioned, she kept saying, "I don't know, I don't know." She couldn't describe what took her, who took her. Canines never could pick up a scent from the car. Obviously, lots of water in the area. I think it's odd that she could say, "Man took me," but couldn't describe the man. But at 2 years old, that's not really that unusual. Let me talk to you about another case. Also, just 50 miles away from where Summer disappeared, versus 5 miles to one of it. Minnie Hahn, 3 years old, disappeared.
Obviously, I respect David Paulides with his missing 411 files, but there's just a little bit of misinformation in this, and he is not aware of all the pedophiles being around Summer Wells' home. He is not aware that Don Wells has not been exonerated by anybody, and that Bigfoot nor aliens or anything supernatural has picked up this child and took off with her. This is still an open investigation, so at this point, Missing 411 should really not even be doing this, in my opinion. And let's get through our main suspects before we start going into the supernatural. How about it?